The Cincinnati Bengals defeat Brian Callahan and the Tennessee Titans in one of the wilder games I can remember in Bengals history. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
But Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We are Locked On Bengals on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Welcome back to the Everydayers. Welcome back to those of you who make us your first listen and have that awesome habit in your life. And welcome into those of you who are first-time Locked On Bengals listeners. If you're looking for a place for daily coverage on your Cincinnati Bengals, well, you have found the right place, and you can hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss an episode. And James, this was an absolutely wild game that we have to talk about in Tennessee. And this episode brought to you by FanDuel, where you can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com, where you can get started. And between penalties, between turnovers, between big plays, missed extra points, garbage time, touchdowns, this game had everything, and it was full of ups and downs and a whole bunch of craziness. What's your big takeaway?
Oh, yeah, I've never seen a game like that. That's it. It's because you're talking about 26 penalties. You're talking about the most penalties of the Zach Taylor era for the Bengals, 14 accepted, 15 total. Your 10 turnover day. Holy moly. I mean, 10 turnovers. You had a play that had 2 turnovers in it. Just cannot happen with Jordan Battle. But at the end of it, you have a team in the Bengals that came out really sluggish and responded. And then it got kind of weird there in the fourth quarter, and they found a way to score. And they beat a team that we expected them to beat in a game that was weird at times. And they haven't always done that this season. The weird game against the Patriots. It was weird, not as weird as today. It's still weird. They didn't pull that one out. So I'm not going to overlook this win on the road. Back-to-back wins for just the second time this year. 6-8 on the year. Like I think there are some positive takeaways for sure from this game. But my main takeaway is, oh my God, what did I just watch? What am I watching? What is going on? Like during the game, because it was insane. The only thing we didn't get was the Titans like tying it at one point late and really putting the pressure on. Outside of that, this had everything down to the wire, from turnovers to Devondre Sweat stiff arms to great plays by Burrow to awesome runs to ridiculous throws by Will Levis that end up intercepted. I mean, it had everything. It was certainly an entertaining, eventful game. And ultimately, the Bengals were able to find a way to win.
A game in which the Bengals should have scored touchdowns on the defensive side of the ball on back-to-back possessions. A game in which the Bengals could have had 3 defensive players score touchdowns, one of which happened on offense. Instead, it's only 2 defensive players scoring touchdowns with one of those on offense. But after Geno Stone's pick 6 on the very next drive, you get one of the best plays of McKinley Jackson's young career in Cincinnati to force a fumble and blow up a run that Jordan Battle drops before he crosses the goal line. And a play that is one of those things that makes you scratch your head every time it happens. And it's not like he just dropped the ball intentionally too early. He's switching hands for some reason and fumbles the ball, which is reminiscent of a particular Drake Kirkpatrick play to me from the past, not scoring a touchdown in a situation that was somewhat similar. But as you mentioned, James, the game starts with an interception from Joe Burrow. Again, there's pressure, and it's looking like Devin Cochran's going to have a really long day at left tackle. And it wasn't like it was a great day for Cochran at left tackle, but the Bengals had severe protection issues in this game on the offensive side of the ball that directly led, or indirectly led, I guess I should say, to 2 Joe Burrow interceptions, his first multi-interception game of the season, a 3-turnover game, even though one of them may not have been a turnover, the Devondre Sweat fumble that leads to his stiff arm.
His elbow was down.
His elbow certainly appeared to be down. And I guess they didn't have conclusive video evidence. Later in the same game, this officiating crew, which was very busy and appeared to be very incompetent for both teams, I would say, rules a Will Levis fumble not a fumble on the field, deprives the Bengals of an opportunity to return the fumble. Now, when you watch the replay, it does appear that there's a Tennessee Titans offensive lineman ready to touch Muma Meta down. He hears a whistle, so he stops, he pulls up and doesn't touch Jong Meta. But you don't know what would have happened there because the play was blown dead on the field. And so a couple of officiating gaffes in this one, in addition to calling anything they could call. If it was a tic-tac call, they were going to call it. If they could call it, if it was questionable, they opted to throw the flag. There were a bunch of procedural issues in this game for both teams in a relatively empty stadium, which was the biggest surprise to me. Cam Grandy with 3 procedural penalties. You had the illegal formation called on T. Higgins that was not explained well on TV, although I think it was actually an illegal procedural penalty in terms of the formation. But man, what a wild and busy day for the officiating crew on top of everything else. And so, well, that's not the big storyline. It is something that we have to reference because there are 26 penalties in this game, and I don't think they're all the right calls, and they probably missed other calls. And man, it's just crazy to get that many penalties in one football game, and to mix it in with everything else that happened just makes for one of the weirder games you could watch.
It's the first time since at least 2000, the broadcast said, that you have 25 plus penalties and 10 turnovers in the same game.
Crazy.
And it is crazy. And I did think Burrow's elbow was down. I thought the officials got 2 DPI calls, one on each team that set up touchdowns, wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The one on Chase Brown, wrong. And then, I forget the defender that was called for it. And then Cam Taylor Britt, I don't think that was a DPI either. So kind of wash out there. And in the good news is the Joe was down, right? What we're saying, the football gods had Will Levis fumble, and that's when the turnovers kind of started.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, the Bengals did show me something after that first quarter, because the first quarter, it's just kind of like slow motion. It's like they were partying on Broadway last night, and everyone was moving slow. You have the noon kick here, so it does feel an hour earlier, even though it's not. And man, they just did not get out of the gates. The Titans scored 14 points in the first quarter for the first time this season. And it's like, all right, well, what is going on? And I thought both units, the offense and the defense, responded the right way. Obviously, Will Levis helped them. But you forced 3 turnovers in the second quarter. The offense goes downfield, and you're rolling now at halftime, 24-14, after Joe Burrow throws a game-opening interception. On that first possession, you look up and he's 20 of 27 for 216 yards and 3 tutties. I mean, you take that all day long and a half, and you get there, obviously aided by those turnovers.
Yeah, it was 17 points off of turnover in the second quarter. After the Will Levis fumble, the Bengals, despite not getting an opportunity to score this fumble on defense, they do convert for a touchdown on the offense. Then you get one of Will Levis's first unfathomably bad decisions in this game that made me ask the question, is Will Levis the worst quarterback in the NFL? And he played a lot like that today. That was a nice play to capitalize on an errant throw by Cam Taylor Britt, thrown right at him. Essentially, the Bengals go 3 plays, 38 yards for a touchdown on that one. All of that coming after a false start penalty, by the way, speaking of penalties, on a 38-yard touchdown pass to T. Higgins. Which was an awesome play by T. Higgins to catch the ball in traffic. Not perfect ball placement from Joe Burrow in that one, but good enough to give him a chance. And it was a play that they needed in 3rd and 10 from the 38 with the way Cade York was kicking today. Nearly missed an extra point, did miss an extra point. You're not kicking a field goal there. Then they have to end up kicking a field goal from the 3-yard line after they have to spike the ball with time running short after another Will Levis interception. This one on a deflection and a great play from Mike Hilton to scoop up a tip drill pass. So 17 points off turnovers in the second quarter to get to a 24-14 lead and an opportunity to put the game out of reach in a way that not even this defense could let up. And the game didn't go smoothly from there, but that started to put the Bengals firmly in the driver's seat and enabled them to get out to the big lead that made this game relatively comfortable. In a season of very uncomfortable Bengals games, this was one of the more comfortable that they've had from a margin perspective, despite how weird it was. We'll continue to talk about some of the weird things that happened in this game, particularly in the second half of this game, coming up next. This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by BetterHelp, and BetterHelp knows that in the winter months, there's a lot that can make us happy, whether it's looking at beautiful lights up around your neighborhood or just getting cozy in a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate, watching your favorite holiday movie. Therapy is a great way to bring you that comfort that never goes away, even when it's not the holiday season. So if you're thinking of trying therapy and looking for those sustainable solutions for self-comfort and the tools that you need to give that to yourself, you can give BetterHelp a try. It's designed to make therapy convenient, entirely suited to your schedule. It's a flexible schedule. It's all online. All you have to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll be matched with a licensed therapist that fits what you're looking for. And if it's not a good fit, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. You can find comfort this December with BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/lockedon. You'll get 10% off your first month. Again, you can check it out at BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Today's show is also brought to you by the College Football Playoff. Yeah, that's right. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all of the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup. The Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max.
James, you mentioned the halftime stats for Joe Burrow, over 200 yards at 3 touchdowns, finishes the game with just 271 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. So not a whole lot of production for the Bengals in the second half on offense, but a big reason for that is they only have 3 possessions. Their defense scores a touchdown. The Titans have 3 straight possessions technically at one point because the Jordan Battle fumble recovery off of McKinley Jackson and then fumble through the end zone technically leads to a 3rd straight possession for the Titans where they throw another interception. So the Titans have 3 straight possessions in the box score technically, and all of them end in turnovers. The Bengals only with 3 offensive possessions in the second half.
Yeah, he was 6 of 10 for 55 yards and an interception in the second half. Just to give you an idea, he threw 10 times. And it's because they didn't have the ball. And this game, it never felt uncomfortable. You're right, in the second half. But it would have been completely over had Jordan Battle just walked another foot with the ball. What he said after the game is that he wasn't celebrating, that he was trying to switch hands.
He was.
Yeah, and I saw that because then the moment that he started to lose control of the ball, he went to try to grab it. It's not like he was setting it down to go dance. But it's like, man, you're right there. Who cares what hand it's in?
Yep.
Like, just get across. It doesn't matter if it's on your head as long as you're possessing it. And I that's a tough one. The good news is it wasn't a close game where you had to have that. Otherwise, that would have been as painful as any.
Yeah, it's the best way to learn that lesson, I guess, is in a game that at the time was 31-14. But how emblematic is that of the Bengals season where, every time something good happens, they turn around and follow it up with something that keeps the game close. And that doesn't keep the game close in this context because it's a 31-14 game at the time, but that's a play that you can't repeat. And so hopefully that's a lesson that we don't have to talk about again. Something that you see happen around football though, and it's every time it happens, it's just bewildering that it does happen, but you can't take away the awesome play that was created there, the McKinley Jackson play that sets that up to go along with the Trey Hendrickson play earlier in the game on Will Levis, keeping the ball on a 3rd down. A couple of really great plays for this defensive line to create some turnovers that weren't just Will Levis or Mason Rudolph throwing the ball straight at defenders, which they did 3 times. One of the interceptions was on a tip drill. Like I said, Mike Hilton scooping it up off the turf on an awesome play for him. But the defense did capitalize on those opportunities this week that you have to give them credit for, James. And, that there are opportunities like this that we've talked about in other games this year where they've had interception chances and haven't completed those opportunities. They didn't complete all of them the right way, the Jordan Battle one being the chief example there. And so you credit them for those things that went well. I want to throw a little bit of water on that parade or rain on that parade a little bit, because the defense still has some of the same core issues that they've had this year. They're not consistently getting pressure. In fact, in the first half on Will Levis had only gotten pressure home about 10% of the time, according to PFF charting. That continued for most of the game until it was a drop back passing offense with Mason Rudolph. They started to get home a little bit with the game script in their favor. They couldn't tackle again. And it might be game plan related stuff, but they're giving up a lot underneath. And when they got to those checkdowns late in the game, when the Bengals were playing off, just trying to keep the game, in front of them, let clock bleed, the tackling issues in those spots are what are so emblematic of this defense this year, where they're not getting guys to the ground and they're getting off these big run after catch opportunities. And so like a lot of these problems still there, despite a very opportunistic day for the defense, where there were some positives to talk about as well.
Yeah, certainly some positives, but you're right. They're still flawed. It's still flawed.
It's the same defense.
And it is. And so we know they have flaws. It's still good to see Geno Stone make a play, right? And I do think he has been better in recent weeks.
He has been.
I think, a guy like Josh Newton making his first career interception, you love to see that. Just confidence-wise, it's got to help. So, yeah, I think this defense, it's one of those things where I expected them to make some plays today, given the opponent, and they did. But we know what they are, and we know they're flawed. The good news is, and I didn't really finish, I should have finished my point when I brought it up earlier, but a 5-8 team that gets punched in the mouth on the road, and the crowd here wasn't crazy one way or the other. I thought there were a lot of Bengals fans here, but it's not like it was a chaotic environment. But you're on the road, it's kind of chilly, it's, you're sluggish. Like, you didn't have to respond. You didn't have to do what they did ultimately, which is respond the right way to this adversity early on. And part of that is, again, they're going up against a team like the Titans that desperately needs a quarterback. At the same time, I do think this defense deserves some credit because they did make some plays, should have made one more, put more points on the board. And yet at the same time, to your point, do you trust them to tackle in a key spot, in a key situation? I mean, I don't. Jermaine Pratt has a career high tackles this year, but it felt like he's going to have a career high for missed tackles too in a season. He had multiple missed tackles today, and it's not just Jermaine. There's a bunch of guys that had missed tackles today. I didn't really pressure-wise. I was hoping to see a lot from some of these young guys. You go down the stretch, and I don't know, man. I would have loved that if Myles Murphy had a strip sack today. And we could say, Myles beat J.C. Latham for got a strip sack on Will Levis. And we don't have that right now. So some good, some bad.
Yeah, Myles Murphy incidentally tied for the Bengals lead in pressures on the day, according to Pro Football Focus charting, with 3 pressures. BJ Hill had 3 pressures as well, and the Bengals' only sack of the day because Trey Hendrickson's forced fumble was ruled a tackle for loss. It was a running play. That's why it was ruled that way. Will Levis was not looking to pass the ball. So not a sack for Trey there, but nonetheless a good play. Most of those pressures were Myles Murphy.
He did get a quarterback hit late. So
okay, cool. Good note there as well. Also 2 hits registered for Joseph Osai, who was unable to continue his sack streak that we, I think, talked about a little bit at some point in the last week, but did have a couple of quarterback hits. According to PFF charting. And so most of these pressures, though, coming late in the game when the Titans are in clear passing mode and are in desperation mode a little bit there. That's where Myles Murphy's pressures come. And they were good pressures. They still count as pressures. They're good, clean wins if you watch them from a tape perspective, from an evaluation perspective. But they're not happening when the game is in the balance or he has to figure out if it's a run or pass. And so potential steps in the right direction there. Late in game, getting some pass rush wins. You take those. I think Trey Hendrickson drew a few flags in this game, and JC Latham had a number of penalties as well. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from the front there. Mike Hilton, awesome game. McKinley Jackson, awesome play. Geno Stone, awesome play in this game as well. So those are some clear ones. Cam Taylor-Britt with a bit of a bounce back here late in the season as well, as he continues to show that he should be part of the Bengals' future with a little bit of a late season surge in play from Cam Taylor-Britt, which is nice to see as well. Coming up next, James, we haven't talked a whole lot about this offense, which is not necessarily like us. We'll finish the show with some thoughts there as we wrap up our thoughts on this Bengals win coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get to FanDuel.com right now and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet is a win. That's right. You can get in on all the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And they have everything you need in the app to place live bets in the NFL in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, maybe you were thinking, hey, the Bengals are down 14-7, but they're going to roll the Titans. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com. And whether it's the Bengals next week, they have 2 Monday night games. Yeah, so you can get on the action there. The NBA, the college football playoff, which we talked about earlier, all of it in one spot, FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
We got a Sam Hubbard touchdown, James.
Hubby Tutty.
That's good. I hadn't heard that one. He unfortunately got hurt on the play, and afterwards said that he thinks it might be a PCL. It'll be evaluated further when the team gets back to Cincinnati. Unfortunate injury there. He didn't return to the game, was very quickly ruled out. But that's a fun play, and there were a number of fun plays on the day on the offensive side of the ball, despite a 3-turnover day officially for Joe Burrow. 2 turnover-worthy interceptions that he threw. Both of those influenced strongly by pressure, I would say. They really struggled to protect in this game. Alex Kappa also had issues with an injury late in the game, had issues protecting in this game, as did Cordell Volson, as did Devin Cochran, sorry. Just a number of protection issues for this offensive line that there's no help coming. They're going to have to find ways to continue to play with an increasingly injured and battered unit. I guess Cody Ford will return. That can be considered help, but we'll have to see what's going on with Alex Kappa too, as despite him not playing well this year, he's at least a veteran piece that is available to them. And maybe you think that they'll get better if he can't play down the stretch and they have to get creative with their offensive line combinations. But Burrow, I thought, despite the interceptions and the fumble that shouldn't have been a fumble, played mostly pretty well in this game. Again, showed off the awesome pocket management. And outside of those couple of interceptions where there was pressures and extenuating circumstance that led to those picks, I know he was frustrated after the game, but I thought he managed the game pretty well given what was going on from a pressure perspective, James.
Yeah, I think this week's been really freaking hard on Joe. And I think that's it. I think that's where we're at, and I'm not going to speculate. It's not like he told me that, but I just think it has been, and it goes without saying, right? And so, yeah, I think he played well, not perfect, but if you would have told me coming in that he would play the way he did today, and not necessarily show me the numbers, but just in general, I'd be like, okay, well, yeah, they probably win, and that's what Joe does. Now, yeah, the frustration. I like that. I like that he's pissed off afterwards and talking about how frustrated he is and is direct with Zach on the sideline. And he's frustrated. It's been a frustrating year, and it's been a frustrating week for him. So showing that emotion isn't a bad thing. I think it's good for his teammates to see it too and hear that even after a second straight win, they've only done that twice this year. And he said that. He said, don't take it for granted. We haven't done it much. At the same time, you could tell he was frustrated. Mm-hmm. And I saw him in the locker room and just kind of, walking around, you could look at his body language. It's not like he was having fun and laughing. And no, it didn't necessarily feel like a loss, because Joe after losses is just a certain way. but it didn't necessarily feel like a win either, if that makes sense for him. And that's good after a win, I think, because you know you're going to get the best of Joe, and they'll need the best of Joe. We'll talk about the final 3 games, but they're going to need him to be awesome, given what they're trying to do over the next 3 weeks, which is get to 9-8 and get to a winning record for what would it be, a 4th straight year.
Yeah, it's similar to the way he reacted after the Las Vegas game, right? Where he's frustrated after a clear win. They won that game 41-24. They won this game 37-27, with that last 6 for the Titans being a very garbage time touchdown that didn't need to happen as the time on the game expired. They didn't kick the extra point. Another thing, by the way, that made this game weird, the extra point that wasn't after that last touchdown of the game. When the offense and the team manages to do well, but Joe's not happy with the way he played, or they're not happy with penalties, or they're not happy with certain execution kind of things, this is the response you get from Joe Burrow, who holds himself to that standard, who is frustrated when things aren't going his way. Now, if this is a different season and the Bengals are, say, 9-5 right now or something instead, and Joe is very frustrated after a game like this, or maybe they're 10 and whatever. If they're in a clear position where they're winning a lot of games, maybe this could wear thin, where it would look a little petulant at some point, where it's like, okay, but you guys are good, you're winning games this year. But he's probably not that frustrated if they're winning a lot of games this year either. And in a season where things haven't been good enough on this team, holding himself to that standard holds the team to that standard, and he does hold the team to that standard as well. And so it is, I agree. I don't see anything wrong with him expressing his frustration either on the sideline or in the post-game press conference. And it tells you about what Joe's about and the standard that he holds himself to. And as you point out, James, I mean, a rough week for Joe Burrow in many ways, I think, between the knee and things off the field.
Yeah, that's what's hard, is like,
he's still human.
Man, no doubt. And there's a lot to it. And so for him to still, again, for this team to respond, that says something. It just does. Now, it's a crappy Titans team. A lot of it, you could say, oh, it's handed to you. You still got to make the plays. You still do. Like, if you're Geno Stone, you still got to get across the goal line. You got to make the read. You got to step in front of the throw. You got to do it. And he did it. And that can only help. And so I expected them to handle business today. I expected Joe to play pretty well. And the other part of this, like, hard week stuff, it's not just off the field. That knee was like hurt. Mm-hmm. His knee is like, that was like a thing. It's not nothing. And so for him to get himself ready and then move the way he moved today, and I thought he moved well.
Yep.
Against a good defensive front that has some athletes on it, man. I mean, we saw Tavondre Sweat with the stiff-armed Alex Kappa into the bad place. I don't know, man. Whew. He's you're dealing with athletes out there, and Joe, man, he's just moving well. Because he was not 100% today. I'll tell you that right now, not 100%, and he was still playing at a high level, moving around. So that's why. We said it when they were, and I'm still not even really thinking about the playoffs, but when they were trying to stay in the playoff hunt, it's like, well, if they get in, you still have 9, and that's scary. No one wants to deal with that. No one wants to see him in a win or go home situation. And this is why it's less than 100% on the road and still making plays and taking advantage of opportunities in the first half to take control of the game.
Yeah, the touchdown pass to Chase Brown stood out in particular as a really great play outside of structure, but he did it a few times in this game. Jamar Chase also should maintain his position as a Triple Crown leader. Didn't score a touchdown today, but had a comfortable lead there. 94 yards should be more than enough to stay on top of the yardage leaderboard, where he has a little bit of cushion. And 9 catches matches CeeDee Lamb, who is the next closest on the receptions leaderboard, who has played. Brock Bowers hasn't played, but he maintains his lead for catches with a couple of those touch passes they threw in there for Jamar Chase in this game to get those reception numbers up a little bit. on effectively running plays that count as catches for Jamar. So I'd like to see that from Zach Taylor and the Bengals as they pursue that triple crown for Jamar Chase. Also, shout out to Chase Brown, who goes for 97 yards on the ground, another 16 added on as a receiver in this game. Chase Brown's a real piece of this offense, and the improvement that we've seen from him year over year, I think, very notable and very promising for his future. Whether he's a full-time running back, which I don't think he needs to be, but he's taken some steps as a pass blocker too. They could certainly use another piece there. He played 64 snaps, and the midseason acquisition, Khalil Herbert, just 3 snaps in this game. So, I think ideally long-term there's another piece there, but that can be a conversation for another day, James. Just wanted to make sure we shouted out Mr. Chase Brown because I thought he was good today as well. And I guess the last one would be Mike Gesicki chipping in as the third option in this passing offense. Another solid day for Gesicki behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Those are all my thoughts on the offense, James. Let's get out of here. That's going to do it. We'll be back, of course, this week. The Bengals have another game coming up against the Cleveland Browns. A couple home games coming up here down the stretch. And until then, the Bengals win. They get to 6-8. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.